All right, everybody, we'll go ahead and get things started right now so you can get back to the rest of your day. I'd first like to welcome you to Channel Vision's training today on IP 101, Surveillance and Automation Integration. A couple good things going on today. Channel Vision does have a handful of accredited courses for CE credits, so as an attendee today, as a CDO member, you will receive half a credit for today's training. Stay for the whole training. You'll get a certificate upon completion referencing the course code below. With that being said, my name's Troy Barron, and I'll be your presenter today. I'm the National Sales Manager here for Channel Vision Technology. And just a little bit about me. I've been in the industry for about 16 years now, both working as a custom retailer for AV, as well as working in the distribution channel, as well as a handful of years with the manufacturer as well. So with that being said, if you're not familiar with Channel Vision, this year will be our 20th anniversary. Channel Vision was founded back in 1993 and began in the garage of our CEO and president, Mr. Daryl Hawk. And over the years, the company has been built on the foundation, focusing exclusively on the needs of our customers. And over those years, we've grown dramatically by listening to our dealers and providing products to meet their unique demands. And Channel Vision continues to listen to its customers and prides itself as a solution-driven company. At the end of the training today, you may receive a survey, both regarding the presenter as well as more information you'd like to see from Channel Vision, and we certainly value your feedback. Going along, if you're not familiar with Channel Vision or you think Channel Vision just makes modulators and splitters, I have news for you. Channel Vision is one of the largest structured wiring manufacturers in North America for that one central location and distribution point in the home, as well as having a full line of IR control products that are truly plasma-proof for control of any application, whether it be surveillance or audio equipment. We do have our own high-performance audio line, including a full line of high-performance speakers, as well as being a licensed manufacturer of ABUS with a full line of intercom solutions, surveillance solutions, which we'll be discussing today, as well as Channel Vision exclusive technology. Now, today we're going to go over a handful of different things. This training will take us about 50 minutes or so, and we're going to go over a variety of different things, including some key features of the product, some basics of setting up your IP installation, as well as some of the IP camera networking basics, and some considerations and variables that you will encounter. Now, since there are a large number of people on here today, it gets a little difficult for everybody to be able to raise their hand. So if you do have a question, there will be a little question box chat on the right-hand side, and since not everybody has a microphone, you can type in your questions there, and we will do our best to address those questions at various points throughout the training. With that being said, let's begin. If you're just getting started in the CCTV and video surveillance, you're certainly at a good point. Over the next 2 years, you can see that video surveillance is expected to grow almost 9%, which is nearly twice the next closest category, above commercial networking, AV, and energy management as well. So the good news is there's some opportunity for you there. Another reason you're going to seek opportunity with video surveillance is that burglaries are on the rise. According to the FBI in 2010 alone, there were over 2 million burglaries, and over 74% of those occurred on residential properties. Since many of us are marketing towards the residential homeowner, this definitely poses an opportunity for you with this market specifically. Now, today's training is going to go a lot over IP video, and many of you may have already done analog video, and are considering getting an IP, and there's a few reasons why you should definitely look into that. For starters, with IP cameras, you will receive better video quality for facial recognition, and we'll call it the CSI effect. You do have a scalable expansion, as being opposed to the limited number of channels of a DVR. You can take your IP install beyond the traditional hardware and do many more cameras than you traditionally would with your typical analog system. Being able to use a simple Cat5 wire makes things a whole lot easier and less expensive when it comes to wiring. Additionally, with IP, it makes off-site storage capabilities and recurring monthly revenue a whole nother option, as well as the opportunity to integrate with your home automation systems and touchscreens. You certainly have a lot of opportunity when it comes to IP. On the analog side, obviously it is less expensive. However, with the Channel Vision IP offering, you'll find that IP camera and the expense excuse is no longer valid. With that being said, let's get into some of the details of what we're going to go into today. Specifically, some of the camera design considerations that you will encounter when dealing with an IP system. We're going to briefly look at the concept of megapixel resolution, wiring, your different recording types, how you can control your bandwidth, and discuss nighttime applications and variables you may encounter. With that being said, we'll start with wiring. When it comes to wiring, there are a few things you consider. There's a lot of different options and a lot of different marketing towards different ways you can do cameras. One that you may see out there your customers may ask you about are wireless cameras. Now, please note that even though your camera may claim to be wireless, it will still require a power supply. And wireless cameras typically are going to be very low resolution, slightly better than your average webcam. Now, you can use a Cat5 system for IP cameras using Cat5 wiring, or Cat5 wiring for Cat5 wiring for a video baling system, which allows you to combine analog video and power and use that over a single Cat5 cable. Alternatively, traditional analog cameras are often done using coax, including RG59 for video and 2 conductors for power. One alternative you have with IP cameras is you have the ability to use a PoE switch or power over Ethernet switch to power the cameras utilizing that Cat5 wiring that we're talking about. Regarding nighttime applications, this is also something you should consider when you're designing your system. The first question that you have to ask yourself when you're at the site is, what is the available light? Are there floodlights, street lights, porch lights? What kind of light is available on the property? Total darkness is equivalent to a 0 lux rating and will require IR illuminators. An IR illuminator essentially is an invisible spotlight that reflects light off of your subject you're viewing in order for the camera to produce an image. With that being said, you also have to take into account how far away you're looking to see and what kind of reflected light will be available, meaning that obviously white does reflect better than black when it comes to using IR illuminators, so certainly consider your surroundings and how you plan on implementing those cameras in the job specifically. Now, when IP cameras come into play, we have to talk about a few things, specifically your network bandwidth. Now, bandwidth refers to how much data that you could actually send through the network. It's usually measured in bits per second, but you could think of the bandwidth as the highway with cars traveling on it. The highway is the network connection, and the cars are the data. Therefore, the wider the highway, the more cars that can travel at one time. Now, bandwidth can be controlled by several factors. The 3 primary factors that you can control to control the bandwidth usage of your network are resolution, compression, and frame rate. When we're referring to resolution, IP cameras are measured in the terms of pixels. The higher the resolution, the higher the pixel count, the greater amount of detail that you'll be able to capture with your video image. Now, it's important to determine how much detail is enough to meet the requirements of your specific surveillance application. Typically, as the image quality goes up, so does the amount of bandwidth required. Now, compression is an excellent tool that you can utilize to ease the strain on a network. There are a variety of compression technologies available, such as Motion JPEG, MPEG-4, and H.264, that all allow users to stream high-quality video without hoarding too much bandwidth. Now, H.264 is the latest compression technique, which dramatically reduces file size while increasing overall efficiency and lowering your storage cost. And we'll talk a little more about compression options in a moment. The third variable that you can control to control the bandwidth of your cameras are your frame rate. Now, frame rate is something that can typically be adjusted in either your IP camera or video server, or sometimes in the video management software that you're using. Now, by controlling the frame rate, you can greatly reduce the bandwidth that is being used by eliminating unnecessary frames from traveling over the network. Now, one common technique that you can do on surveillance systems is to set up your frame rate to go up only when motion is detected. This will reduce your bandwidth during majority of your time on install. Now, with that being said, how much is enough? And my typical answer is it depends, and it really does depend. If you looked at the previous slide, you saw that we had three main things that were affecting our bandwidth: resolution, compression, and frames per second. Now, the information you see here is based on a typical 10-100 network. A typical network at a residence, for example, is using a network switch that can support either 10 megabytes per second up to 100 megabytes per second. That's the 10-100 network we're referencing. And this is your typical network switch that you may purchase from your local electronics store. The numbers below will show your typical bandwidth usage, or I'm sorry, megabits per second, when it comes to how many cameras you're going to use. So in this application here, we're looking at using a 2-megapixel camera, using the latest and best compression, set up at 8 frames per second. Now, mind you, this is per second, so that's actually plenty enough video to get you what would be considered practically full motion video, using 10 megabits per second for all 4 cameras. Now, a general rule of thumb is that you want to use less than 50% of your available bandwidth at all times, meaning that this practical application here is more than adequate for your traditional homeowner with your Xbox 360, surfing the internet, and being able to view your cameras without hogging too much of your bandwidth. Now, next month's training, we'll talk a little more about bandwidth control and some variables for you to look into, but we'll save that for another day. One thing you do need to consider also is the importance of upload speed when it comes to your network connection. Many of your service providers tend to advertise download speed a lot more because upload speed tends to be a lot slower. Typically, your average Comcast or Time Warner internet package will offer you anywhere from 10 to 20 megabits per second download speed, which is actually pretty good for your average home. Your upload speed, on the other hand, is typically between 3 and 5. Now, the reason you should care about your upload speed is because this is the variable that affects performance when viewing remotely. So, for example, if you're logging into your cameras from your office to view your cameras at home, the upload speed of your video service at home will be important and will play into the factor of how fluent your motion is when you're viewing your video remotely. Now, one other thing that you can do when you're setting up IP cameras is you can establish a parallel network. Essentially, what a parallel network means is that you're basically getting another internet connection and running a whole separate network by itself. The good news is when you do this, yes, you do have an additional charge per month, but it does give you greater security. Obviously, you don't have to worry about anybody downloading any weird Facebook apps because the only thing on the network will be the cameras itself. It certainly does make it easier to troubleshoot because all the IP addresses will be assigned specifically to the cameras without any additional devices on the network. This makes it much easier to consider bandwidth because you're talking just about what the cameras are using, and it will not affect any of the performance of any of the surrounding equipment at all. And the last reason you may consider doing a parallel network is typically it's IT friendly. If you're doing a commercial application, your IT guy that you're working with on site at the company, at your customer's location, typically will not want you infringing on his space or anything that can affect his performance. So a couple reasons why you can consider running a parallel network when doing your IP cameras. This comes more into play when you're doing more than 8 cameras or you're doing a larger scale installation. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about here is megapixel resolution. Now, megapixel resolution has taken video surveillance to a whole nother level, offering higher quality resolution, which is going to yield you greater image detail. As you can see here, we have the camera mounted about 40 feet up, and we're looking about 100 feet, 80 to 100 feet out. And you can see that we can zoom into the image that's being played back and still being able to capture a license plate. This is what we call the CSI effect, and is important when setting up your customers' expectations of what you can really see. If you're looking to acquire facial recognition or license plates or anything of that nature, it's going to be mandatory that you're using a megapixel camera and that you have it properly set and focused in on the specific focal length that you're looking to acquire an image at. I mentioned a little bit earlier that we'd be talking a little bit about video compression. And for all intents and purposes, there's two primary forms of video compression that we're looking at, specifically motion JPEG and H.264. Now, motion JPEG is a series of snapshots creating the illusion of motion. Think of motion JPEG as cartoons back when they used to draw cartoons, with one image per slide, which would create the illusion of motion. The other concept that you have to do when compression is consider is H.264. H.264 is one of the latest compressions available, basically optimizing your compression format, giving you more space, better video quality while taking up less space. So certainly a feature that you should consider when you're streaming your video using the H.264 compression format. Now, recording is the next question that you will have to ask yourself, because there's a variety of different ways that you can record IP cameras. Excuse me. You can simply do remote monitoring, which means you're logging into the browser looking at the cameras. You can utilize the CMS software or central management software for recording on a PC. You can also use a dedicated piece of hardware, such as a network video recorder, which is basically a DVR for your IP cameras. An alternative that you have to do now with IP is cloud recording. There's a lot of talk about the cloud, where that's going to go. You might have iCloud on your phone or a variety of different cloud resources, but there's also opportunity for recurring monthly revenue with cloud recording, which we'll talk a lot more about recording in our next month's training. So if you want more information, be sure to register for that. But we will go through some of these briefly. So when you're doing remote monitoring, what you're essentially doing is logging in through your browser and accessing your camera. Through this standpoint, you'll be able to have many of the features that you'd be looking for. You'll have access to your settings up here in the right-hand corner. You'll also have the ability to take a snapshot of what you see there and save it as a JPEG file, as well as some of your status indicators. Down here, you'll be able to see the timestamp, physically control the size of the stream itself, see what stream you're viewing, because our IP cameras do offer dual streaming, which we'll talk a little more about later. The ability to have audio on or off, as well as showing the specific number of users on at any given time. So this is logging in through your browser, whether it be Internet Explorer or Safari. Either option will be available for you. The second option that you have for recording comes to utilizing essential management software. Now, this is typically a software that allows you to load a software on a PC and essentially convert the PC into a network video recorder for your IP cameras. Typically, this is a little low-cost solution, and it's going to afford you all the same features that you'd be looking for in a dedicated piece of hardware, including the ability to set up your channels, adjust your motion, add individual users, and a variety of additional features that are useful when it comes to recording. The detail when using the central management software that you're loading on a PC is that the PC does obviously have to be on, enable for it to be recording. But nonetheless, a solution for you. And when you purchase a Channel Vision IP camera, it's a free solution that you have for recording also. If you are going to be using a PC for recording, it is recommended that you do add a network attached storage device. And essentially what this device is, it's more or less an external hard drive that plugs into your network that you can route storage to. Because with the concept of IP video, you do have a little bit more storage usage than you would with the traditional analog system, and that's obviously because you're going to have dramatically better video quality. So when you're looking at video storage, there are a couple questions that you should be asking yourself when you're doing the installation. Specifically, how many cameras are going to be on your surveillance system? Will these cameras be recording all the time or just during certain hours of the day? Will your IP cameras be set up for motion only or constant recording? How long do you intend on storing the video footage? Are you looking for on this specific application? These are the main questions that you'll have to ask to be able to determine your questions or of how much storage you'll need. And as you can see, there's a lot of variables involved, plus the other things that we've already looked at. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, Troy, so how much storage do I really need? Well, the technical answer, besides it depends, is an example that you can see here. Using the best video quality of a 2 megapixel camera, which is 1600 by 1200 resolution, more than 5 times your average analog camera. With a full 15 frames per second, using the best compression, you can expect to use approximately 2 gigs per hour, give or take. Typically it's a little less, but that's just a benchmark for you. Now, if you think that sounds like a lot, well, you can say that maybe it is. But if any of you are out there downloading movies off the internet, you typically know that a DVD is 4.7 gigabytes and holds approximately 2.5 hours of video. So if you look at it from that perspective, it's in line with what you can expect for high-resolution video recording. Your third option that we're going to be discussing today is how you can use a network video recorder or dedicated piece of hardware to record your video. Essentially, this has a device that just plugs into the network, just like your IP cameras do, and then the IP video is routed to the network storage device, or the NVR, for storage. So it's just another device on the network that will pull the video streams to it for recording, and then can be viewed through the network over your computer just the same. Now, with that being said, I will say that we just released our 4-channel network video recorder, as shown here, and this unit itself will support HD resolution up to 1080p on your video cameras. Using SATA hard drives, you can add multiple storage units in here, up to, I believe it's 4 terabytes of storage. It is FCC, RoHS, and CE certified, so there's no worries, as well as being ONVIF compliant. ONVIF is something we'll talk a little more about in another training, but in essence, ONVIF essentially is an industry standard implying that by carrying this certification, everybody will play nice together. Included with the NVR is a free central management software, which is slightly different than the software that we were looking at earlier, but allows you to group multiple NVRs into one access point. What I mean by that is that you can log in from one computer, see 2 different locations, and see all the cameras at those locations. The NVR does give you the opportunity to do smartphone viewing, as well as having UPnP built in. Now, you know, we do love our acronyms in this industry, so we're referring to Universal Plug and Play. Now, this is a feature that's built into the Channel Vision DVR, which means when you plug it into the network, there's no port forwarding required, and you can access this remotely without even touching anything. It's similar to the concept of hooking up your Xbox 360 live so that you can play with Call of Duty with your friends on the internet, as some of you may do. Now, without further ado, I will address some of the products specifically, and then we'll have a quick section for questions as well. When we're looking at some of the IP cameras, you'll see we have a handful of different options for you, both indoor, outdoor, dome, bullets, as well as custom flush mount solutions you can't find anywhere else. Our 2 most popular cameras happen to be the 2 megapixel 6521 and 6522 cameras, and that's because they offer a 2 megapixel high resolution of 1600 by 1200 lines. That's a lot. These cameras also boast a varifocal or manually adjustable lens so that you can manually set up your zoom for a specific application. They are outdoor rated, water resistant IP66, and offer all 3 different streaming options that we discussed earlier, including H.264, MPEG-4, which is a slightly older compression format, and MJPEG streaming. Most IP cameras don't have IR illuminators built into them for nighttime viewing. However, the Channel Vision cameras do, so you can actually use this in the dark and still be able to capture an image, as well as view that on your smartphone. Carrying the ONVIF compliance logo means that we do play nice with other manufacturers when it comes to integration, as well as offering a 2-way audio feature, analog video output, and SD card option for flash recording on your dome camera. Now, how easy is it to set up your cameras? Well, if you're talking about adjusting the focus and the zoom, all you got to do is take a quarter or a flathead screwdriver and be able to set up your adjustments simply from here. Now, the cable pinout is another thing that you consider when you're looking at your IP cameras, are the features that you want. The channel vision cameras, the 65, 21, and 22 specifically, offer a variety of different options when it comes to your cable pinout. Specifically, it does have the 12-volt DC option if you decide to use power locally instead of using a power over Ethernet switch, as well as using an I/O terminal or input-output terminal. This is known as an alarm relay. You also have an analog video output. This is a nice feature that's built into the camera and gives you two practical applications. One, if your customer is in the process of upgrading, maybe they have a touch screen that you want to integrate with, but they have an existing DVR, you can use this video output for recording, or you can use this video output for checking your monitor to make sure that your camera settings are exactly the way you want while you're still on the ladder. You can use a microphone input and output for audio, for two-way audio, and you can do almost all of this over the Ethernet port as well. Now, we talked a little bit about PoE, but let's talk a little more about it. When we're referring to PoE, we're talking about power over Ethernet. Now, this concept enables power to be provided over a single Cat5 cable for up to 328 feet away. Now, some good things about PoE switches is they do eliminate the need for power outlets at your camera locations because you can just run everything back to a Cat5. Another great benefit that you'll get with PoE switches is more often than not, they offer you the feature of being able to remotely reset your router and camera through a browser. And some advanced or managed PoE switches also give the opportunity to control how much bandwidth is allocated for certain ports. So there's a nifty little application there for some of the more advanced PoE switches. We're using the 802.3AF 15.4 gigawatts of PoE, and that's what we recommend when using with our cameras. When you're using a PoE switch, all you got to do is plug your cameras in and plug it into the network, and don't forget power, and then you're done. That software I mentioned to you earlier, the sensor management software that we took a glance at earlier, gives you a lot of additional features. This is a software that's included with your cameras and allows you to record up to 36 cameras with no additional licensing. What does that mean to you? Well, like I mentioned, many other competitors do charge what's called a licensing fee per camera for adding that to your central management system, whereas Channel Vision includes this high-performance feature that gives you the ability to load it on a customer's PC and hook up as many Channel Vision cameras as you need for recording, up to 36. Just a couple other real quick features before we get to our question segment is that you can use a variety of different phones for viewing, whether it's a Windows mobile phone, BlackBerry, or Android, or iPhone. If you are using the iPhone, you can use the Channel Vision branded app that's now available in the App Store, and we'll give you the opportunity to remotely view your camera specifically or web camera servers, watch live video, play back with cache recording, and even take a snapshot of what you see out there. The last thing I'll mention on the product until we get to the question segment is our camera video server. Now, what this device is essentially is an analog camera input that assigns an IP address to an analog camera, essentially making it IP. It has a variety of different compressions, is available in 1 and 4 channels, and this unit will allow you to do flash recording, the best resolution you can do with an analog camera, have multiple users logged in, and is a great way to add a camera system to your customer's existing install and maybe be able to integrate it with an automation system with the existing cameras that the customer already has on site. Dramatically low-cost option to be able to get quote-unquote IP video onto your automation systems, and certainly is a solution to consider and a great retrofit option as well. All you got to do is plug the cameras in and then plug it into the network. This server does have what's called a loop out feature on it, which essentially means that you can plug in your analog camera and then output that video back into the DVR for recording. So nonetheless, an option that you do have when it comes to IP integration. Now, with that being said, if you do have any questions right now, do type them into the right-hand side over there. Like I said, I apologize since not everybody has microphones and speakers. It does take a little bit longer to answer all the questions, but that way we make sure all the questions get addressed. And if we don't get a chance to address your specific question, we'll be able to talk about that a little bit later in our recap. One question we have so far is, what if we want to run power over Ethernet greater than 328 feet? This is a good question, and the technical answer is it really depends on your application and the PoE switch that you're using. You can use a variety of different switches that will give you a slightly longer distance, but also you can use network repeaters to expand that distance as well. Let's see, got a lot of questions. There's a question about when would you use MJPEG over H.264, and the answer to that is two applications. You could use an MJPEG stream to use less bandwidth, or if you're integrated with an automation system, many home automation systems require an MJPEG stream in order for it to be viewed on the touchscreen. The question is asking here, did I say that we can do playback on the iPhone? What I did mention is that using the Channel Vision app, you can access cache recording. What that means is that you'll typically have 30 seconds of viewing based off of what you previously saw. So if you're looking at your camera and say, hey, somebody just walked to my front door, who was that? You can back it up a little bit. But it's not going to grant you access to the recording because there's different ways that you can go about recording it. One question is regarding the software. Does the software work on Macintosh computers? As it stands today, the software, the CMS software that we're referencing, does not have Mac compatibility. However, you can view it through the browser. A question regarding, does your server act as an encoder? Server and encoder are two more or less of the same things, implying that you'll be able to encode an IP address into the analog stream, giving it an IP address. So yes, a server and encoder are the same thing. There is an Android app for this phone as well, which is one of the questions here. We're using a third-party app for Android, which is called iPro Secure, and does give you some opportunity for using an analog camera. Now, there's still a handful of other questions. Some of them I may actually be able to address in a little while. So if you stay tuned, I will try to address some of these questions at a later portion if I might actually be able to answer them going through. Or, like I said, worst case scenario on our follow-up reference sheet. So with that being said, let's continue for a little bit, and you can continue adding questions as they come up, and we'll get a chance to review those in two more segments going down the line. Now, what we're going to talk about now is a little bit of basics, and this may be review for some of you already when it comes to network basics. What I'm basically going to do for you right now is just take 6-7 slides and show you how easy it is to set up your IP cameras on the network. Now, before you start, you're going to need a handful of things. You're going to make note of your router brand and model number. Make sure that you have the admin password for your router, as well as referencing your brand of your modem, and denote if you have a dynamic or static IP address. We'll talk a little more about dynamic versus static IP addresses in a couple slides later. But to find your IP address, you can use a third-party website such as ipchicken.com and find the external IP address of your setup. Now, with that being said, some more acronyms for you. LAN versus WAN. LAN refers to a local area network. Your local area network typically has an IP address. It means your device on the local area network typically starts with 192.168. Something else. And this is the information that is referencing your internal IP address of the specific device and used in the DVR or IP camera settings. Okay. Then there's the external or wide area network. Typically starts with 64.183 or something to that extent. And this is the IP address accessed from outside the network and is used in your hosting settings of your IP camera service, which we'll talk about in just a second. Now, real quick, to locate your IP address, just as using Windows XP, it's the same concept for 7 and 8 and everything else. Go to your command prompt, type in run, and that'll take you to a DOS prompt where you just type in ipconfig/all. That will generate a screen that looks a little something like this, and you'll have to jot down your IP address. Now, this is the IP address of your computer that you're looking into on the network. From this screen, you want to have a little pen and paper with you because you're going to want to jot down 3 other things as well, including the default gateway, the DNS server, and your subnet mask. Once you have this information, you're going to log into the settings of your IP camera and enter this information into the setup fields. And then you're going to actually physically change the IP address. This is where you, my friend, have some authority. You can assign the number of the IP camera, giving it its own unique IP address, just making sure that it's different than the computer's IP address. Now, the good news is I showed you how to find all of that, but the good news is that the software that's included with the Channel Vision IP cameras does all of that for you. I just wanted to give you a little reference point to show you how quick and easy we can do to find that point. Now, the last thing that you'll have to do with your IP cameras in order to see it from outside the network, meaning remotely log into it or see it on your phone, you will have to forward a port on your router. Now, I mentioned to you earlier that our NVR does have a UNP or Universal Plug-and-Play feature, which means you would not have to do the step if you're using our NVR if you choose to. But typically, if you are going to forward a port on your router, we typically recommend using port 5400 to 9000. These are typically allocated for security devices and makes it super easy. Now, from this standpoint, it does vary depending on the router that you have, but essentially at this point, you're logging into your router and plugging in the IP address of the camera under the virtual server page. Now, this is that IP address that you were empowered to change a little bit earlier, and then you just simply designate the port that you want to open anywhere within that that range that we discussed. In this example here, port 8006 or 5400 or whatever you choose. Click the checkbox and you're good to go. If you do need help forwarding the port on your router, there are other websites not affiliated with Channel Vision called like portforward.com, for example, which has a majority of manufacturers listed that you can actually walk you through the steps on how to forward a port on a router. But this is just a general overview on how that would look when you're integrating that system with any system. The last part I'm going to mention is that we do offer a dynamic hosting service or free DDNS. Somebody asked a question earlier about is this a static or dynamic IP address, and we talked briefly about it when getting your factors for setting up your cameras. Typically, a residence is using a dynamic IP address, which means that it's always changing. So what a DDNS service does is essentially it's a number that gets assigned to you. While your IP address typically does change in the background, the DDNS service facilitates the changing of that IP address and gives you one number so that you can always have the same IP address. Your alternative to using a DDNS service is to actually purchase a static IP address, which is a fixed number, which is never going to change. But this is a free service that Channel Vision does offer with your cameras or DVR purchase, and what's nice about it is it makes it fairly easy to log in. So instead of logging into your camera by going 64.183.43, et cetera, you can just put in the name of your DVR, .channelvisionsecurity.com, and then the port that you forwarded, and be able to log into it. Once you've done that, all you have to do is log in to your browser and plug in your admin password and be good to go. Now, that was a fairly quick little rundown on networking basics. Just to recap, you guys can type in any other questions you have, and I'll see if I can address some of them now. But a majority of your a majority of the networking part is fairly simple, especially with the software that we've included that makes it super duper easy for setting it up. Here's a question regarding the cabling that I should use. We talked a little bit about wire earlier. So the question is, what type of wiring should I be used consistent with a camera pre-wire? Well, there's two answers to that. There's Cat5, which is one option that you can use either for analog or IP. Obviously, it's required for IP cameras. Your alternative is to use RG59 or RG6 and 18.2 for power. Now, on the side note, we do have the ability to, if your customer has, if you're doing a retrofit job and your customer only has an analog installation, meaning they have RG59 and 18.2 there already, we do have a video balun, which essentially takes that analog video wire and allows you to put an IP signal on it. Our web servers can handle either 1 or 4 cameras, depending on which one you go with. Here's a question: does Cat6 make a difference for future proofing and any news down the way? The technical answer to that is yes. Cat6 does offer slightly wider bandwidth and a couple other features. Typically, Cat6 and Cat5 are backwards compatible devices, so by all means, you can use Cat6. It'd be better if you ran Cat6 and then started using larger switches. So certainly a good thing to consider, but nothing of crisis nature. Here's a question: is there a time frame for installation of IP cameras compared to analog? I believe what this question is asking is, what's easier to set up? The technical answer is it depends, and that's my typical answer. It depends on your network experience. Like I said, with an IP camera, using my software, it'll find all the IP addresses, so that'll save you some time. However, if you're not using a dedicated piece of hardware, you would have to forward a port on your router for each of those cameras. I mean, you're all in the same place at the same time, so it's nothing that dramatic. But by using the UPnP features that we talked about with our network video recorder, can make your installation done in practically 15 minutes, depending on how long it takes you to run your wire. Let's see here. We do have a lot of questions that we're not going to be able to get to because there's still a handful of them. We will follow up with you guys individually and address all of these after our little survey that we send out afterwards. But certainly some opportunity to get some more information to you guys. But we do have a lot of people on here and understand that people do have some things to do. So we will address these questions momentarily and have one more section available as well. So with that being said, now many of you guys hopefully are AV folks and CDA members that are on here today, and many of you may be using a variety of different automation systems. Now, the reason we talked a little bit earlier about IP being a big benefit is that you can integrate them much easier with your automation system since everything is IP-based. Many of you guys work with network equipment already, so some of this stuff, like I said, may have been reviewed, but we're going to go over how specifically you can make these cameras work on a variety of different automation systems. So we're going to talk real quick, and this won't take too long, about some of the applications, how to identify the different streams, and how specifically to integrate them with various different platforms. Now, before I get too deep into that, I have some more acronyms for you. There's essentially 3 to 4 ways that you can integrate IP cameras. You can use drivers. You can use what's called an RTSP stream, an JPEG stream, or what's called tab. Now, tab is the most important for you guys to remember today. Does anybody know what tab stands for? Anybody? Bueller? Bueller? Well, tab stands for Troy Allen Barron. Those are my initials. Don't worry, you don't have to remember that. That will not be on the quiz, but just another fun acronym for you. So to take a little deeper dive into these 3 options that you have here, we'll start with drivers. Now, what drivers are specific communication protocols for specific platforms that can be written either by the manufacturer or, in some cases, the installer performing the installation designed to perform specific functions. I really just wanted to see how many times I could throw specific in one sentence. But that's the overall concept of a driver. When we're referencing drivers, Channel Vision does have IP camera drivers available for Control 4, written by a third-party company that just does drivers for Control 4, known as Extra Vegetables. If you guys are doing Control 4, there's a good chance you know who they are, and those are free drivers available to you. Or if you're a savvy programmer, you could write your own. Since we're on the topic of Control 4, and then we're going to move into a couple of the other automation systems, we have a lot of Control 4 compatible products, and you can take a look at the screen as well as some other documentation to reference those items. But what Control 4 system is allow the images from the camera to be displayed on the Control 4 interface. Now, that's what it does, and that's all it does. It's not going to give you access to the recording software or essentially make any other changes in the camera itself. It's really just pulling the video stream and making sure the camera and the Control 4 processor can speak the same language. Now, if you're doing Control 4, it's a simple installation real quick that you just run through. There's no specific activation key required or anything like that. You just log into your documents on your Control 4 system and essentially load the driver. Once you have that downloaded, you simply choose Channel Vision as your manufacturer and IP camera as your device. And then once you have that, make sure that your port matches the IP address that you assigned earlier and the port that you assigned earlier. And then once you have that done, you'll be able to view the cameras directly on the touchscreen itself, or select them manually, or grid screen, or a full view. Now, what's unique about this is there's not a lot of camera options that do work with Control 4. However, the Channel Vision IP cameras are going to offer you one of the best priced options for integrating Control 4 with with IP cameras, no longer making IP too expensive. And like I mentioned, we have a handful of other Control 4 compatible products, which you can take a look at channelvision.com for, or ask for more information a little bit later. Now, the other thing that we mentioned earlier as another option is what's called an RTSP stream, or real-time streaming protocol. Now, the good news is there's not a great deal of action required on your behalf. If your automation system supports an RTSP stream, it will automatically be looking for this in the IP network. So, for example, a Crestron system, which uses an RTSP stream, to be able to set that up, all you have to do is enable RTSP on the camera. So you log into your settings like we were looking at earlier, logging in through the browser, click the little wrench, and select RTSP. It's more or less that easy. Once you've been able to check that off your list, you can log into what's called a VLC player, which is more or less just a media player that plays RTSP streams. Check your device and make sure everything's working, and then you're good to go from there, and you'll be able to view everything as advertised. Now, the other thing that you could look for in one of the more common applications is that MJPEG stream that we talked about earlier. Like I mentioned, an MJPEG or motion JPEG is just a series of quick snapshots creating the illusion of image, and this is the preferred method for many automation systems, such as listed below: HAI, RTI, AMX, with Savant as well. And we do have a profile written for these cameras for Savant also. So now the question comes up again, so how do I find this stream? Well, kind of like the RTSP concept, there's two streams on our cameras. You can assign one for H.264 for recording and the second stream for MJPEG. Once you've set that portion up, which is just a drop-down screen, nothing complicated there, your operating system of your automation system will look for this already. So you'll know if your device supports MJPEG because all you have to do is search for it. So that makes it super easy. Now, your alternative too is if you're doing commercial applications, we have some help for you there also. Beyond just a traditional residential application, we do integrate with a couple of the commercial video management platforms, such as Next Level Security and Video Insight. Why would you consider using these two? Well, these, for example, are going to offer you a lot more features than that software that we talked about. They will allow you to integrate biometrics, integrate POS systems, video monitoring, video storage, and a handful of other things in between. So these are just two applications if you're coming across a commercial install that you might might want to look at as well. Now, we'll open up the line for a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap things up since we know everybody's got stuff to get back to today. There should be a copy of this on our YouTube channel if you haven't taken a look at it yet. We do have a handful of our recorded training videos that you can access on there as well, so that you and or your team members can view the training at any time. There's a question back on port forwarding. Where do I look for the port setup in the router? This is typically once you log in under your admin, it'll be listed as a virtual server. And once you're in the virtual server, that will typically address that specifically. Let's see here. Here's a question on here regarding does your system work with Elan? I can see that you mentioned HAI, Savant, Control4, Crestron, and almost everybody else, with the exception of Elan. The technical answer is it should. However, there's not a specific profile or anything written for Elan. So if that's something that you would like, I would encourage you to lean on your Elan rep and perhaps even provide us with some additional contact information so that we can better support you guys. Here's a question regarding the IP stream. Is it possible to stream an IP camera to a homeowner's TV? Well, there's many TVs out there nowadays that are called quote-unquote smart TVs that are quote-unquote IP accessible. Now, with that being said, these TVs aren't full-blown computers. They have little microprocessors, little basic operating systems. So the technical answer is no, they can't be viewed directly on your TV that way. To view your cameras on your TV, there's a whole separate training that we have. Obviously, the first first product we ever made 20 years ago was the modulator, which is still a viable option for seeing on your customer's TV. If you are using an advanced automation system like Control4, for example, you can use the My Control4 system and be able to pull it up on the customer's TV. So in that application, yes, you can use it, but not stream it directly to your customer's TV, no. But you will be able to stream it to your iPad, iPhone, browser directly, and a variety of different other options as outlined today. Now, there's a handful of other questions that we'll come back to in the survey afterwards. So with that being said, just a quick little recap for you guys on some other stuff. I mentioned a few times that we have opportunity for you guys for help here. We're available 24/7, 365 for any technical support that you need. As I mentioned, we're a smaller manufacturer, and we certainly pride ourselves in being able to help our customers, whether you're in the field. We encourage you to please call us if you're in the field and you're having any trouble, whether we're talking about IP systems or not. We do offer a variety of different warranty options, 1-year powered products, 10-year on everything else, opportunity to expand your warranty services, as well as our trade-up program, which is a great program that we offer so that you can actually upgrade your older technology and buy it from us at a discount. We do offer free training, so hopefully nobody charged you to come here today because this CEDIA certified training was free to you as a CEDIA member. We do have free system design services, so we can obviously help you lay out anything that you're working on. If you're doing that, you can go to channelvision.com on the bottom right-hand side, click on Custom Panel Design, fill in the blanks of what you're working with, whether it's a structured wiring enclosure or an IP system, and we'll lay out exactly what you need, give you a complete shopping list for you, as well as a great sales tool to help with presenting this to your customers. We do have our latest catalog available on channelvision.com as well. You can download that as well as access to our new dealer portal, which is a brand new feature we just released. You guys can log in, get access to our suggested dealer pricing, as well as access to top secret documents and a handful of items in between. I mentioned a couple times during the training that next month we're going to be doing IP 201, which is going to talk a little more about how you can manage and build profit with your IP system, talking specifically about more detail in the recording, talking a little bit about control and your bandwidth, as well as opportunity for recurring monthly revenue. That'll be next month's training, so get a chance to register for that. And like I mentioned, follow us on Twitter, be our friend on Facebook. We could always use some more friends. Who doesn't, right? And you can watch a lot of our training videos on our YouTube channel, as well as some installation options videos on there as well. And like I said, there'll be a handful of feedback that we'll send out in a survey, and anything that you guys have, by all means, let us know, because we're always looking on what we can do to improve to better assist you. With that being said, it looks like I'm just under an hour, as promised. That way you guys can get back to your day. I certainly want to thank you for attending today's training. I apologize if it felt a little rushed. We understand that you guys do have other things to do, and may have been an overview for some of you, which is why we have those recorded trainings available so that you can take a look at them at your pace. You can give us a call at the number on the screen if there's anything that you guys need from a tech support standpoint, or any sales assistance that you need. So without further ado, if you stayed for the full training, you should be able to get an email shortly that has your certificate of completion, so that you can submit that to CEDIA for your CE credits, as well as a survey that you guys can give us some feedback on. So without further ado, we certainly appreciate your guys' support, and do have a couple promotions running on, so log into the website, take a look around, give us a call, because we're here for you guys. Thank you. Make the rest of your day a great one, and please let us know if there's anything we can do to help.